another episode of the AI Healthcare Podcast. I'm your host, Dylan Reed, and today we are joined with my friend, Rudolf Wagner, who's a digital health thought leader. Thank you so much again for your time today, Rudolf.
Hi, Dylan. That's my absolute pleasure to be with you on this podcast.
We're glad you're here. As they say in German, los geht's.
Exactly. Los geht's. Perfect. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I'm trying. I didn't mean to butcher the German language, so.
You didn't. You didn't. Yeah, you even didn't more or less than I usually do. So all good.
And so, what got you into the AI healthcare field?
Well, it was a little bit coincidentally because I was working on software as a medical device, and based on the regulation, the international regulation, it says any software. So naturally, as AI has nothing to do with hardware for the time being, as it is not integrated, um, it is a software. So I kind of slipped into that because I was working on normal software, normal in a sense of standard software communication tools, and suddenly AI appeared, and yes, it is software, and it is per definition part of the software as a medical device.
And how would you describe, in relation to AI as a software, as a medical device, the regulatory environment in Germany right now?
Well, yeah, in Germany it is not special because Germany has adopted the R. So it is the same for the EU, UK, as UK and many other countries are part of the IMDF, the International Medical Device Regulator Forum. It is even the same across the world, same in the US, same in Europe. So it is. So if we take Germany, it is not. I don't want it to sound special for Germany because Germany adopted everything else. So the environment, we have a twofold environment. The first one is for those who produce AI for healthcare use with clinical claims such as treat, diagnose, triage. That is basically a medical device, like any other hardware or software medical device you put on the market. As soon as you intend as a manufacturer to be used for treatment, diagnosing, informing clinical management, driving clinical management, so diagnosis or any kind of doctor's reaction, your medical device of class 2 in Europe, class 2A or higher. That is one fold. So if you want to bring something on the market which is used across the board, and you want to sell it, it is a medical device. The other part is, and I posted about that a couple of weeks ago, a paper. The other part is what happens in hospitals. So if you are a hospital, we assume Dylan owns a hospital, or I own a hospital, and I just want to build an AI on the back of the data I hold, hopefully consented. And I want to build it not to be sold on the market to anyone else, but only to be used by my doctors within my hospital. Suddenly, you are out of the medical device regulation. Not many know that, but hospitals are under a different regulation. So in the US, for example, medical devices are 21 CFR and hospitals are regulated by 42 CFR, complete different regulation. And there you do not need to register it with the authorities. You have a much higher degree of freedom in terms of when and how you bring it to the market. You still have some obligations in terms of safety, data privacy, clinical validation, but that is up to you. You can validate your own AI for your own hospital. So you have a higher degree of freedom. You can be much faster. And that's what we see in the US, in Europe, and in Germany, where hospitals develop their own AI. That, of course, harms the market a little bit, because if you want to sell to a hospital your AI solution, you have to go through a very expensive process to register your software as a medical device. But the hospital, in the meantime, can be 3-4 times faster with developing their own AI. So that is a little bit the market situation, what we see, and what the regulatory landscape is for both the end user, the hospitals, and by the way, the doctors could do that too. If you have a residence practitioner office and you are a GP, you can do that too under the same hospital regulation. And we have the manufacturers who offer solutions.
Mhm. Wow. So it's it sounds like it's quite complex.
It is complex if you produce an AI for the market. So if you are in selling it to various hospitals or directly to consumers, with a little asterisk, and I come to that, then you have to go through the medical device process, right? You need to engage in Germany, you need to engage with a notified body, you need to submit your technical dossier, you need to have clinical evaluation, you need to have all the cybersecurity measures in place, you have to do a proper risk assessment, and. It's very expensive and it's a lengthy process, usually around a year.
Wow.
Um, with a little asterisk, I have to say, because there is no enforcement currently, no authority, whether in Europe, not, and I say that with all the given, I give credit to the authorities. We know they don't have the best funding, they don't have the amount of people they would need. We know that it is not because they don't want to, it simply can't. There is no enforcement. So if you place, and we see that left and right in the app stores, there are many clinical claiming AI apps in the app stores who have never done any efforts to go through the regulatory process. You can place it on the market, and the risk to be caught is very little. What we see, especially in Germany, we had already one legal lawsuit, and there are more underway, where your competition is filing a lawsuit. So let's assume we build a healthcare AI with clinical claims for treat and diagnose. We place it in the app stores of Google and Apple. We can do that. The risk of being enforced by the authorities is very little because they just don't have the capacity currently. But your competition is there and they watch the market. So it might be that before even any authority catches us, and starts enforcement, that our competition has already filed the first lawsuit against us because we are not compliant on the market. And we see that. So the risk for AI developers for healthcare is currently more the competition than the authority.
Wow. So in kind of what you just described, it sounds like then it would just turn into like selective enforcement then. Like if they catch, if you catch one, then we're like, oh, well, we're going to exert our full authority on this particular case.
Yeah. And to expand a little bit, it will be the same with the EU AI Act because, it is a very good regulation. And I'm a strong believer that the software as a medical device regulation for AI and any software in healthcare is also a very good regulation. It might be the best regulation we will ever see because when you look into the history of regulations for pharma, for medical devices, for cosmetics, for food, every time they have changed the regulation, it was not more in the favor of the industry, but less favorable for the industry. It was tighter, it was stricter. And usually also when you look into, and we go back a long time, how the FDA, for example, was founded, it was because there was an issue. There was a product on the market killing people. So usually when something happens on the market with a non-compliant device, drug, food, whatever, cosmetic, then we have let's say a change in the regulation to a more strict regulation. So what we have today is the best we will get for sure. And I think it is not that difficult. We have over 950 AI, which are FDA approved, over 500 in the EU with CE marking. So you can do it. It is not that complicated. It is achievable. And I think, from a risk perspective, if I was a startup founder and had a great idea, a great AI product for healthcare, why not? It is also what many people forget. It is a marketing instrument because a regulatory approval is kind of stepping up and differentiating you from the competition. If you have a CE mark, you are far ahead of the competition.
Wow. And and you touched upon this a little bit, um, but I'm very curious to kind of learn more from your experiences. How was the regulatory landscape and kind of the market compliance environment, like how was that practiced before AI really came onto the scene?
Well, very similar because the software as a medical device regulation was brought into place in 2017 by the IMDF. The SAMD regulation was then adopted also in 2017 and until 2021 by the EU and Germany. And in 2021, on the 26th of May, EU MDR was basically valid. And before that, AI was not so much a topic, it was more called algorithms. We had early machine learning models. When you look into the registration database of the FDA, the first machine learning algorithms, where an algorithm was the result of a large data set being trained into a machine learning software, was from 1997, I think, 1997, sorry, I think. And so there were a few, and they were already approved as medical devices by then, although there was no regulation, because both in Europe, in Germany, the Medical Device Directive, MDD, 9342, that already regulated software as a medical device. But of course, it was not that widespread as we see today, because today everybody has seen AI, and it is, and it is cheap, it is available, it is not a thing of experts anymore. There are many tools which you can use, whether it's open source models you can fine tune, or they are even for a little price. I mean, we have to say, right, when you look into the more famous models from OpenAI, where you can have a Plus or Teams membership for relatively considerable prices, or if you have other tools which help you, or which let you upload a huge amount of data, that has really helped even doctors, right, to use that. And I mean, here in Germany, around me, when I talk to doctors in hospitals, I mean, we need to be honest with ourselves. One thing is the regulation and what the authorities and the government and people like me who give input to that think what is the right thing. And the other thing is the reality on night shift in a crowded emergency room with only one doctor because the second person is on sick leave or whatever, right? That is the dark reality. And when you speak with people and they are honest with you, they tell you, yes, we use ChatGPT, right? So even today, although OpenAI excludes the medical use in their terms and condition explicitly, even though ChatGPT has never been approved for healthcare by any authority, doctors, because there's an app on your phone, if there is, if there's a huge crowd and they need rapid help, they trust it and they
Mhm.
ask it. They I mean, even today you can speak with some of the AI models, right? So you open the voice interface and you say, listen, I got a 52-year-old who has fever, right? And stomach pain. Give me a list of potential things I need to check or potential diagnosis, right? That is already a regulated use, but people don't know that. People don't care in that very moment. They just need a help like they would ask a colleague, right, around the corner, hey, listen, this is my patient, what do you think, right? So they use it kind of a replacement for a discussion with their peers. So the regulation is one thing, the use is the other thing, and I think that happened even before 2017, you know, when people had a chance to work with either, sometimes they build even their own apps, right? Or they build their own software, or they build their own databases. They made an Excel table with their experienced diagnosis. So there were always a kind of gray market of software tools even before that regulation.
And
I expanded a little bit. I'm sorry, but a little detour and a little bit history is important to kind of understand what is happening and what is not happening, and to put things into perspective.
yeah, no, definitely. And just out of curiosity, so another AI model their French is Mistral. Like, how is I'm just curious, how is Mistral kind of like a big player within the AI healthcare space in Europe too as well?
Yes and no. I mean, the we not always know what are the underlying models. So we do not, again, we split a little bit. For the
Mhm.
registered use cases, so when devices, AI tools have a regulatory approval, CE mark, FDA registration, whatever, we sometimes know which model was used. We not always know which model was used. So it's very difficult to differentiate, what is the underlying model which is used. Is it an open source model? Is it Llama? Is it Mistral? We do not know, or not always know. I think, that is one element. The second element is in startups.
Mhm.
Yes, the open source models, because they are cheaper, are usually preferred in building a specific AI model, um, if you want to build a new product. We know that open source models are preferred, but they require a, a higher degree of knowledge and IT sophistication, because you need to train them on specific data sets, right? So if we both would develop a lung cancer detection AI, and we are a startup, so we spend our money on the software developers, on the software engineers, and to get the data sets, the annotated data sets to train our AI. So naturally, we both would move to an AI model which does not cost anything, right? So there, Mistral, Llama, all the open source models on the market, heavily used,
Mhm.
definitely. That's one thing. In the gray market I described before, because there's not so much knowledge in terms of software engineering, fine tuning, and training open source models. There we have much more proprietary models which offer already a kind of interface to upload data. So we know that larger hospital chains who have their own software development department, they also move to open for let's say, for who want to have a quick assessment with their monetary or financing or invoicing. We know that people tend to use more proprietary model like custom GPTs, which offer you upload PDFs and you get, and ChatGPT magically integrates it into the knowledge. That is dangerous because we still do not know and that's true for all models, what their underlying training data is. So whether it's Mistral, Llama, or the proprietary models from ChatGPT or Anthropic, we do not know exactly what medical data they have used to train the foundation model. They come with the knowledge, right? So if they are trained on open, that means that the books, the medical books they use to train it, are 25 years old. We know that some publications are used to be trained on, but we also know that it's not the paid publications where you need to pay for the publication itself. So also there, the data quality is, I would put a question mark behind, because we don't know it. But that's a little bit the market. Startups use more open source models, and we see a bigger widespread in these open source models as a base product on which they build their final product on. Larger corporations go more for the proprietary models, or hospitals, because there you have the ability to fine tune, to upload PDFs and make it easy. So the convenience models, I would call them.
Awesome. And specifically, like if let's just say like if I have a AI model for kind of measuring a specific health outcome, let's just say to to take your example like lung cancer. Like if I wanted to measure that, and if I'm developing it in Germany and I know Spain is part of the EU, so I want to test it there. But how would you, from like a regulatory standpoint, if you wanted to go to UK with that model, since it's not part of the EU anymore, like what would be like some of the differences, kind of deploying it in a country versus like a non-EU entity like the UK?
So, yeah, as always, there's not one answer, right?
Mhm,
So I take your example and I give a threefold answer. The
mhm,
first one is, so if you are in Europe, but you know that UK is one of your markets, you have currently. So if you watch the podcast immediately, which I would recommend, currently you have the possibility to use their regulatory sandbox. They offer an AI sandbox where you can go with your tool and try it out, work on it. People can use it. Your customers can use it in that regulatory sandbox. You do not need to go through the UK equivalent of EU MDR and obtain a UK CA mark. You can work in MHRA sandbox for AI in healthcare and do it there. So that would be my recommendation if we start today. Generally, when either the sandbox is not available anymore or you want to start in Europe, you get a CE mark, right? And you would start here in the EU with EU MDR, get a CE mark, because until 2027, 2028, depending a little bit on the class, UK is accepting the CE mark. I think that we will see an extension of that because the rest of the world is moving closer together, and the UK MDR, their regulation for UK CA mark for medical devices, is pretty similar to the EU MDR. So I would start in Europe. The advantage with the CE mark, the same way as you have an advantage with US FDA, is that the world, the smaller countries, not the top 20 or top 25 countries, but the smaller countries accept either CE mark or US 510K. So if you have a CE mark, it not only opens you the European market plus UK until
mhm.
2027, 2028, it also opens you smaller countries, Africa, Middle East, Asia Pacific, because they know that if they bring up their own regulation, nobody will follow it because it's too expensive for a smaller market. So they tend to accept US 510K or US FDA approvals and EU CE marks. So that is that is not widely known, but that is definitely a booster. Of course, the EU MDR, but also the UK CA mark is expensive. You need to engage with a notified body based on your company size. If you're a startup, which I assume, you would need to calculate around 50 to 70,000 euros for the whole process, including certification. And that, of course, is for many startups a huge toll to bear.
Mhm. Wow. And from what you've been what with your experience, how have you seen technology, specifically AI technology, positively impact the regulatory compliance process?
I mean, there's also two dimensions to that. So AI technology, as people now experience it firsthand, when you deal with authorities, the understanding of what you are talking about when you say, "I have an AI product which is capable to diagnose lung cancer," in our example, there is an understanding now. You do not need to explain what AI does, because people with that widespread of the large language model now have, although still very basic knowledge, but they have an understanding. So when you deal with authorities, they have an understanding. The other dimension of that is what happens within quality and regulatory. So if you are a company now, 3 weeks ago, when we record that, of course, there was the IMDF meeting in Washington, and some people can attend the first two. I was invited, so I attended, of course, listened in. And very interestingly, we see a tendency of authorities like FDA, but also within EU, with some notified bodies, of using AI, specially trained models, to assess submissions. So that means today, or in the next 2 to 3 years, what we will see is that authorities, where usually a human being, which was the time limiting factor also, or why regulatory submissions took so long from submission over questions up until approval, these reviewers get now replaced with AI. You deal with an AI, are assessed with a tool, with a software. They are using AI to assess submissions, to check your data for consistencies, for completeness, if everything makes sense, if the context is right. So all of that. So regulatory agencies use AI, and also companies more and more automate their regulatory processes, because you have all the raw data, and a technical dossier for a medical device, but also for a drug, is summarizing the raw data. And that's where large language models really have a talent and a capacity to do it quicker and sometimes better. They find inconsistencies, and they have a more streamlined approach, and they don't forget, and they're very emotionless, which helps a lot to be factual, what a technical documentation and a submission, both for drugs but also for medical devices, should be. So what we will see in the industry is a higher degree of automation on the manufacturer side, but also on the authority side, where they use AI. And I assume we will get to a point where you submit your automatic technical dossier, which an AI created, you submit it to the authority, and the authority will come back with a result within a day, because their AI is capable to analyze all of that. And both sides have enough data. Companies have data for their technical dossiers from the past, so they can train it on, and the authorities have all the submissions of all companies and their decisions and their questions of the past. So they can train their AI very well on what they have decided in the past. And I think that's what we will see.
Awesome. And specifically, yourself, how does Rudolf Wagner want to contribute to the greater AI healthcare conversation?
Well, first, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, how do I want? Sometimes I feel like Don Quixote fighting windmills. As I said, I think regulations are important. I think adherence and compliance to regulation is important because I'm a patient at one time, and if I need help in a hospital, and I hope and I fear that at that point in time there will be an AI which is triaging and pre-diagnosing me, and I hope that this AI is regulatory approved because you need checkpoints. We always have the issue that commercial and shareholder value is driving healthcare. We have commercialized healthcare in the decades before very much. So I want a safe AI. I want that somebody has checked it from an authority and approved it. So I want to, I contribute a lot, making people aware that there is regulation, that there is not a regulation, that there are active regulations, that compliance helps us all. um, I want to contribute with opportunities to show what is possible with AI if it's really properly trained. I think the AI models, even the ones which are approved, are not properly trained because when you look into the FDA approved AI and ML products, some of them are only trained on 500 to 1,500 training records. So diagnosis, real diagnosis. And I think that is missing out a lot of the population which have side conditions or which, have a different ethnicity. So I want to make people aware we need to much better than we do today. It's a good start, but there needs to be more done. And I also want to help people and give everybody a chance to succeed with their idea. I think we need to be very careful that big hospital, big EHR, and big tech are not dominating the market and wiping out all the smaller companies which have fantastic ideas, which are capable to fill a niche, which may be like with rare diseases where we don't see so many drugs for rare diseases. We need to make sure that we do not make the same mistake with AI for healthcare or rare diseases and for special conditions.
Awesome. And my last question for you is, what do you think elected officials need to understand about AI and how it plays a role in the regulatory process when constructing processes for healthcare?
Yeah, I think the elected officials need to understand that they are already 3 to 5 years late. They need to understand that their normal administrative process, which usually takes months or years to set up a kind of enforcement process, does not work here. Um, they need to understand that software is a matter of days rather than years. I think they are too much used that whether it's car development or drug development, right? Things take time. This is not the case with software, especially now that we have even no code tools which can code really quickly with with a user interface very quickly within hours, a proper tool like Cursor, for example. It is a matter of days. We need to get ahead of the market. We need to speed up, or we need to say, listen, this is a market where you are on your own, right? That means that we do not enforce it. We give the rules, but everybody is on their own. So we make hospitals and distributors and basically the doctors ultimately responsible, accountable, and liable if something goes wrong. But the current landscape of, oh, we wait until we know how it works and then we develop a regulation. EU AI Act has the code 2021-0106. That means they started in 2021 and in 2024 it was approved. 3 years. We can't have that. In 3 years, can you imagine? You know, 3 years ago, we didn't we wouldn't have that we wouldn't have had the conversation we have today because we didn't use large language models by then. So we need to speed up. We need to get quicker or decide for a different liability model. That's everything they need to know, I think, and then make up their mind.
And Rudolph, where can people learn more about you?
LinkedIn. I mean, that's the central source where you can find me, where you can find my opinions, my articles, everything I publish, right? LinkedIn, go to LinkedIn. It's LinkedIn /IN Rudolf Wagner. So you can find me. It's not difficult.
Oh, awesome. And be sure to subscribe to the AI Healthcare Podcast YouTube channel, as well as listen to the audio version of this podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Rudolph, vielen Dank for your time, and I appreciate you coming on.
Lovely. Thank you very much for your German words. I really appreciate that. And it was a pleasure. And I can only reiterate, subscribe. You know, there are so many great episodes. I listened into, learned a lot. So absolutely, I can only recommend. Thank you very
Thank,
much, Dylan.
thank you. This is Dylan Reed.